Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishnan, and here basically we are discussing about the formula keyword, and that is basically 194th number ongoing. And in 194th, basically we are going to discuss little bit more about the how the cities are basically getting created. And in this, basically we are telling that how basically the cities are basically actually created, how the cities are actually created. So that basically we are discussing, right? So we are discussing that how basically the exact city got created. So here basically we are discussing that how basically the human souls basically creation happens, and how on the base of the human souls basically the birth happens. That basically we are basically going to see, and we basically have saw in last part also that how from the 70 buildings energies the 1 lakh human souls basically was created, and that 1 lakh human souls basically converted into the birth also, that are more than basically 1 lakh. It might possible that twins also can happen from the human souls. That type of human souls also might be there. So like this, basically assume that it's more than 1 lakh human body basically, human child basically got created from the human source on the base of the birth process. Basically, everybody knows that how many types of birth process are there. What basically I already discussed in the part and the past videos. So here the main thing is the city creation has happened from the city creation has happened on the base of that city creation. The human souls basically have the human souls basically got created, right? And human souls on the base of human souls basically the birth has happened, and birth process basically everybody knows how many types of birth process are there. So here basically the main thing is the birth creation has happened. So the generation basically which is going to be in the city, that basically is already settled. So on the base of that only the creation is happening. So this basically is what actually this is what this is actually the chaining system basically you can say, which the chain is already generated long before. That also you can say. For example, this process is not basically a new process. This is the old process because the digital world is very old basically, right? Because satellites system basically are very old. Before the world basically was created, that time basically the satellite was there. So it's a universe, right? Before Earth planet also the human basically was existing. It's not like that the human were not existing. The satellites was there, so everything was there basically. So somebody has created the world, right? Then basically the God got created, Muslims God, Christians God, Hindus God, Parsis God. So this all basically then Gurudwara, Sardar's God, that are basically the Guru Nanak Ji, Sri Guru Nanak Ji. Then basically this all basically got created, right? After Earth planet has created. Then only basically this all created, right? When the Earth planet got created, after that only basically this got created, right? Few people says that few god are basically the universal god. That basically that also might be possible that it might be some universal level story basically you can say how the thing basically got created. So I will take one example of the earth planet. This is going to change lots of things means lots of things are going to change. I will take one example. Assume that there are around 56 languages. Assume that. Basically, in real, basically, it can be more and it can be less. Few languages, basically, we might not be knowing also. But it's spoken in the villages, it's spoken in the few mountains areas. So, basically, few languages we don't know also. So, here, basically, we will take one example. Assume that there are 56 languages in this world, and few universe basically people also comes into the earth planet, and their languages are also there. So that also includes in this 56 language. So now assume that the 56 language are basically getting processed by the nuclear power plants. So it's getting processed by the nuclear power plants, right? Nuclear power plant basically groups, they do the language energy creation process. So assume that there are In few people says that the Sanskrit is the base of the world. Few people says that Tamil is the base of the world. Base of the world means language is the base of the world. So assume that we will take that Tamil also was the base and Sanskrit also was the base. So now basically assume that Tamil and Sanskrit was the base of the world, base language of the world. So is the base of the, not was, basically is the base of the world. So now basically the languages process is happening in the environment. Just see basically how the things are basically very critical, not so easy, because the software industry basically who has basically jumped into the human need creation, and that basically each and everything basically, and the corona medicine basically has prepared. So this all basically this condition 100% they might have taken. That's why basically the corona has controlled, right? So the situation is like that. There are basically two language, base language in the world. So first, basically, assume that from Sanskrit, basically one new word was introduced, and that was basically everybody knows that Sanskrit who speaks. That's basically the Brahmins only. So assume that from Karnataka, one village, one new language got introduced. One new word basically got introduced, and that word basically is the base of the entire world language. And assume that in Tamil also basically new word that also basically from Karnataka. Karnataka in some from village basically. So both language basically started basically getting spoken by the Karnataka Bangalore peoples, Karnataka people, and Karnataka there are basically I think more than thousand villages. They basically started speaking this language, and in Karnataka only basically the ISRO center is there, right? So assume that the nuclear power company has told someone that this is a new word, and this basically is, meaning is this. Then basically they started processing that new word. Then basically the process started from the Sanskrit language. The process connected with the Hindi language. That same word basically I'm taking. So just see basically, we will take that, assume that this is the first word in the world also. Assume that this is the first word in the world also. So then basically the Hindi language, that word basically got processed. So in Hindi basically that word automatically gets processed, and the Hindi language basically what that word is going to be spoken as Sanskrit translate. What would be that word in Hindi? That of Sanskrit. So basically you can say translation of the Sanskrit to Hindi. That is happening in the environment. Then basically the from Hindi the word translated to the Germany language. So after the Hindi language is the Hindi word basically was completely processed. That Sanskrit word basically was processed first. Then basically that Sanskrit word basically translated to the Hindi word. No, not translated. It transferred that Sanskrit word to the Hindi word. Hindi word environment. That is basically Hindi word. You can say matrix. You can say matrix. Just see basically the how the dangerous world is, and this basically is in process also. uh, so now the Hindi word is getting processed. Then after Hindi word basically the Hindi word is completed, and the Hindi word is basically settled in the environment. And this basically each and every word which is going to be spoken, that for example in Hindi this is going to be spoken, in Sanskrit this is going to be spoken, in German this is the word which is going to be spoken of that new word. So each and every word dictionary is already there in the paper. It's already there in the paper. Like this, assume that 56 language got processed automatically. So it's a automate system basically, you can say automate system basically which get processed. So now basically the language get processed, and then basically the people told that basically we can start to speak that words. We will start to speak that word. Then basically the word basically start spoken by each and every people of the world, because now the world basically is containing that word, right? So assume that and this basically language process doesn't happen in one country, right? Because it's German, so basically by default in German environment only that is supposed to be processed. It's not like that the virtual German basically country is created in one of the country, and there basically the German language process, and then basically transferring to the German country. That is not possible. That if this type of system is created, then that system is going to be fail one day. Why? Because the land of the German is also there, so you can't create the virtual environment of the land, right, in the another's country, right? If that is created, then basically this is the wrong system basically created. So assume that in German land only the data is getting processed. So like this basically the 56 in 56 languages the word got processed. So this is also then basically that new city which was getting created, that city also got that new language. So like this is what actually this is actually the dictionary of the words in different languages, and basically each and every city basically must have each and every world's language. For example, 56 languages are there, then basically 56 languages must exist in this city, each and every city. That's why basically the if any country is not providing the visa of the another country, then basically that language is not spoken in that country, because it's restricted, right? Because visa is not there. Then basically visa process happen, then basically you have to activate this person's visa. Then lots of process are there, right? You have to send the oxygen of that particular person, next chain oxygen basically. So you can just imagine the critical level basically of the countries also, you can say how the basically each and every country admin department basically they are handling the world, because there are I think more than 8 700 more than 700 crore people. So 700 crore people oxygen supply perfectly they have to manage, right? So it's not easy task, right? It's a very tough task, right? So if he's traveling to the one country to another country, then basically they have to transfer the oxygen data basically to the another power company, and then basically the another power company says that yeah basically we got that particular person's oxygen. We have already basically set it to the area where basically he has booked his room basically, so you can just see basically the system of the system is also created. He's going to be stay in this place, that in that environment basically his energy is also set it, that this person is going to come in this area, that environment is already set it. So the power company knows first that this person is going to come in this particular area after certain days, because his environment is already set it. So basically each and every single human basically are taken care in this world. So this is basically one of the process. So assume that the new city which is created, in that city, new city, the person is going to come. So the power company basically sets the environment of this particular person in the city. If the scheduled are fixed that this person is going to from here to here, if he is a static person means he don't move here there. He is a just perfect static person basically. That only basically the top level executives can have this type of schedule. Why? Because they know that how difficult it's to create the system. That's why basically the timetable of the each and every person basically are fixed, that this person is going to be here, this person is going to be here after this time, after that time the person is going to be here. As in that in one country basically one person got visited, uh, he got basically one visiting visa, and he's basically representing any country basically, right? So he might be connected with the government visa, then the government visa got issued, and the schedule of the person basically is already also passed by the admin department to the visa consular department. That is basically the another country basically who give the visa. So their schedule are basically fixed. He is going to become. He is going to enter in this car. That environment is also set. So it's very dangerous also, because each and every information basically are getting leaked to the certain groups, right? Because he is going to enter in this particular area at this time, that is basically spreaded. Basically, this is basically the virtual world. Basically, you can say virtual world, the power company. Basically, you can't see the power, right? You can't see this power here, right? For example, one building is standing, but it's standing on the base of certain power supply, right? Power chains basically on the base of certain power supply only. The building is standing. That's why basically the data are basically sent, right? So like this. Assume that the person is going to visit, so his entire schedule basically are fixed. So he's not a dynamic person, he's a static person. So he's the system is also created like that, right? If you will go that area, then basically you are going to face this type of our problem. So the environment is also the fear environment, basically you can say dar environment. That is also basically fixed. If any dynamic person is moving here, and then basically then he will change his lifestyle. That basically he will change his lifestyle to static, because the oxygen power supply is going to pass to these areas only. So it's basically dynamic also and static also, the environment setting basically you can say. Because each and every human basically is going to get this power supply only, that basically is fixed. For example, assume that this basically it's not fully correct, but it's mostly correct. For example, assume that there are few nuclear power plant. They say that we have the data of each and every person who is going to stay for 80 years. So 80-year power supply basically we have of that particular each and every person. We have already created. If he basically does not exist for certain reason, then basically that's the government problem. That's the government problem. So like this, basically the each and every data basically we have already created, because we can't create day or night the data, right? Because it need to do the process, lots of chaining basically has to happen. It's not so easy also. For that basically we have created 80 years data, which is going to be passed for the particular person. For example, there are 700 to a more than 700 crore people. So we have created the data of 700 crore people for the 70 years, sorry, 80 years. So this city basically is going to have this many age of people. That basically we have already data. So for example, one person told that if you are visiting this city, then your basically maximum age would be this much only. Why? Because the environment has set it like that. That you are going to get this much age only. Because the environment is like that. Because the base of the creation of the environment is set it like that. So one software company told that we have created one human source that will guarantee you that you will have a 98 years of birth, 98 years of age basically. You can stay for 98 years. That guarantee basically we give. So you can just imagine basically the human staying also here basically. That 98 years, if he can guarantee, do the guarantee, give the guarantee, then basically you can just imagine the software industry also have reached up to the level. So that basically the human souls creation. So how human souls are basically created, that also we have. So one example, 70 to 80 buildings, and on the base of 70 to 80 buildings, the human souls are basically created, and then the childs are created, and the childs basically becomes young, and then they gets a disease. The doctor are not able to track that disease. Then the case transfers to the another souls department. The souls basically department says that his souls basically his soul basically souls basically, that is human souls, that is called atma, is created from this 70 to 80 buildings. Then basically the debugging of that 70 to 80 building starts, from where basically the souls are basically created of this particular person. Because assume that he is the very rich person, so they can spend any number of money. then basically they spended this money, and then basically they tracked that from this many members and from this many utilities basically which they have used, and this many facilities they have used, and this many companies they have visited, this many places they have visited, on the base of that human souls was created. So just to see basically, then basically they told that something changes is happening in that people, and they are visiting here and there. Basically, due to that, basically, that person basically is getting disease. So they basically told that then the human source department basically visited that place, and they recorrected the environment basically. Then after the recreation of the environment, then basically that person automatically got he basically his disease basically got over basically. It's basically you can say he was not having now disease. So just see the basically the creation also. You can just see the entire creation how it's changed. Lots of people says that there is no like human souls. Then what is this basically? It's basically science only because it's size. It's a set of basically the datas basically which are getting processed. So here basically everything was data. This also basically is the one of the data science project basically you can say which just now basically which has created. If you don't have the data, then basically how basically you are going to create this, you are going to problem solve this problem. Then basically one data science company basically told that yeah basically we can take this project and we can start this project, because this basically if this type of problems occurs, then basically from where basically it might possible that corona which started, it might have started like this only because the environment was not able to set that disease basically which was came. So it might possible that in future more corona like disease might come, and basically you can't track that because your tracking system does not track this, right? Your tracking system of the environment, that is basically the World Bank's stuff. Basically the World Bank basically creates this type of tracking system. They say that we can't able to track that data because it's the human source related thing, man. That's a human source department. They basically have the software inside in their basically area, so that basically don't come into the World Bank department, because World Bank are not supposed to allow to that enter that area basically. Then they were supposed to take care, right? And they have not taken the care. Assume that just. Then basically then the human souls basically groups basically were creating in who are into the human souls group. They basically also started creating the softwares. They also jumped into the data science projects. Lots of things basically they also started. Then basically they also like this basically they tracked the thing basically, right? From this 70 buildings, these are the groups basically. On the base of that group, the human source was created, and then that disease basically got over of that particular person basically. But he was rich, right? He was having the good money. That's why basically he was able to spend the money. That's why the thing basically was tracked, right? If any normal basically person get disease, then basically it's very difficult to track. He will basically die by default because he don't have the money. So this is also basically one of the city creation basically you can say, and this is the base of the creation basically you can say. On the base of this only the entire world is basically created. That's why the still basically says that village still exists. That's why basically people says that village also still exists. That might be some reason, right? Otherwise, basically, why whole world is basically getting created and how the village still exists? It might possible that village also basically people have good money. They also can basically create big buildings, big shopping malls. So there might be some reason basically, right? So we will not go into that reason why the villages are not basically getting created. So assume that this is also basically one of the part of the human souls. This basically debugging is impossible, right? It's not possible to debug. because software industry says that we have not reached up to the human soul's tracking. That is basically comes into the human soul's tracking system, but it's a chained system, right? The human souls basically which exists in the person's body, that particular child body, that is connecting to that 70 to 80 buildings. But before 70 to 80 buildings, it's connecting to the power companies and energy companies from where the he is getting the oxygen. And from that power getting oxygen area, he is basically connected to that companies are basically connected to that 70 to 80 buildings. It's not directly, right? It's not directly coming the data. So here basically what the things are basically, the here basically the error basically was of the power company also, because they were sending this type of data and they basically was not able to track also. They have not kept the tracking system also. So that also might be some problem. So basically there are many problems. So like this, the power company sent the data. Then basically the he was basically the rich person basically, right? That's why basically he went to the power companies also and nuclear power plant also. Basically the data are basically getting the nuclear power plant. Then he tracked the 70 80 buildings basically. Then he tracked the 70 80 buildings. There basically the how the environment is basically created. People says that then basically he connected to the Bollywood groups. Just see basically how the Bollywood groups are also basically involved in each and every disease. They have the solution basically. They then the person basically told that which story this 70 to 80 buildings is ongoing, which type of stories this 70 to 80 buildings are ongoing. Is there any critical stories is ongoing? Is there any romantic stories are ongoing? Which type of stories basically are fight stories are ongoing? Without fight stories are ongoing? Which type of stories are ongoing? And which type of software's data are basically connected here? Which type of software companies basically are giving the energy to this 70 to 80 buildings? So like this, the each and everything basically connected here. And then basically the 70 to 80 buildings was tracked, and then the human source data was also tracked. So you can just imagine the tracking system also the world has created, and next level tracking system basically world is going to create. So here basically we have taken one example of the Bangalore city also, how the Accenture, that lady basically came to Bangalore city in Accenture Bangalore, and she asked the data of the ideas, basically how many ideas are basically spreaded in the Accenture. And on the base of what Accenture is telling that we have the responsibility of creating potatoes and capsicum, that also brown capsicum. So who are basically are working in the Accenture Consulting Bangalore, they are going to produce the data that is basically the potatoes and the brown capsicum. So first she told that I will check this first, whether it's perfectly settled or not. Then basically she can jump into the Bangalore city. Then she first checked this data. Then she basically asked the um, directors that which type of data basically it's settled in the Bangalore, in the Accenture Bangalore, which type of ideas are settled. Then they told that basically it's a very critical data, so we don't have this type of data, right? We don't have this type of data. So they basically have this type of data basically only the the software company union basically only have this type of data. So this type of data only software company unions basically have. So then basically they told that they collected, the lady basically collected the data with the software company union, and then basically she told that yeah basically the data is perfect. Then basically she jumped into the few data are spreaded in the environment of the Bangalore city. Then also she checked, and then basically the capacity was came into the picture. That's of course all the stories basically we have already discussed. So same way basically in this new city basically also the environment was settled. Which type of production these cities people are going to be do. So first basically the base of the each and every people basically was settled. That is basically comes directly to the human souls, from where the human souls basically of this each and every city basically was created. That was tracked. So like this each and everything basically was tracked. Right. After that only basically you can create the system. That basically the government takes off the picture. The government says that we are taking care of each and everything. That's why basically we are government, right? Otherwise we can sit at the home and let the public only run the city. Let the public only run the city. Then public will know actually what actually we were doing. This type of question also one government people will ask the public after getting so much of tired from the public. It might possible that one day he might tell that public you just only run the city. We will sit at home. It might possible, right? Because it's a lots of frustration of creating the cities. By creating the city, it's lots of frustration. You can just imagine the human souls are getting the base, and how the human body basically has got that human souls up to that level. Basically the government has to think, and they basically are thinking, right? Also that's why basically the entire cities are getting processed also. That's why the universe are basically not interfering in the each and every countries basically, right? Otherwise they might be interfering, right? They might be interfering. They might be looking at the cities, each and every cities also, because they know that everything is going perfectly fine. Otherwise because if they will not interfere, then basically it might possible that it might create problem. They are not interfering. That's why basically reason that everything is going perfectly fine. That's why basically they are not interfering. That's why they are not looking into the cities from the universe, from the satellites, because everything is ongoing. Because few people says that they are only passing the data, then why they should take care? So like this also user stories are there. Like this also user stories are there. So like this, the story was of the Bangalore Accenture. From that, basically we connected to the human souls. How the human souls of each and every city basically are created, and how the human souls department are created. So like this, basically nuclear company, power plants, each and everything basically came into the picture. So this is about the 194th number part, and in 195 basically we are going to discuss little bit more about this only, how the cities are basically getting created.